This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second gen with the Odyssey and the Atari 2600, all the way up to Gen 7 with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Today's episode is going to be a different flavor, and it'll be kind of similar to a kind of like a diary rant, and I hate using the word diary, but it is what it is. More specifically, it's like a collector's diary. I've been actively collecting video games for well over 15 years at this point, and I'm not looking to stop anytime soon. So recently, when I was looking ahead at what my next goals were, I started to collect thoughts on my personal feelings on collecting. And it's an all-encompassing feeling. It kind of bounces around to a lot of different topics and a lot of different thoughts. But I wanted to collect them all in one little place. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know if you like it, too. I'd most likely want to do more in the future because I want to share a lot more thoughts on this hobby that's really, I felt hit the mainstream. So let's dive in. As I stated earlier, I've been collecting for about well over 15 years at this point. I mean, I've been kind of on and off with it over, pretty much most of my life. I've bought games, I've traded them in, I've sold them, I've loaned them to people and probably forgot to go grab them and forgot to pick them up. So there's probably games I've lost out there in the ether to people that are sitting here laughing at me like, ha, I just got this game for free. But, but actively, repurchasing a lot of games, I would say for about 15 years at this point, I've been kind of actively collecting. And I'm going to be turning 45 this year. And I've been playing video games as long as I can remember, with my first system being the NES. It's crazy at that time to think I'd still be going strong now, considering video games weren't viewed very favorably by my parents at the time. I think they begrudgingly got me an NES because I kept going to my friends' houses and playing their NES. So my parents were like, fine, let's get him one just so he's not like bugging other people's kids. So some kind of bug hit me a while back around that time, 15 years ago, that inspired me to keep and kind of collect old retro video games, especially the ones that I had fond memories of when I was younger. Back then, we all didn't own vast libraries of video games in our closets and digital libraries because, like I said, there was no digital anything back then. Of course, unless our parents were big gamers and used their disposable incomes to buy troves of games. But like I said, my parents were not gamers. I don't think I've ever seen my mom or my dad pick up a video game controller ever in their lives. We rented games, we borrowed games, we even more actively traded games in, like I said. So a lot of times, if there was a game I played a lot, it's because I rented it a lot, or I borrowed it from a friend for a long time, and I, loaned him a game too as well. Hey, can I borrow this game from you if you, loan this game to me, kind of thing. That latter part, actively trading games in, I mean, people still do, because when a video game has outgrown its use to a lot of people tend to get rid of it and, get some extra money for the next big game. Granted, it's not a lot of extra money, but, it's something to help, help pad the next purchase. And that's the nice thing about physical copies. They actually hold monetary value to the buyer after they are done with it. You can't trade in a digital copy. You can't even loan a digital copy to some people, unless you share, your account with them or whatever. But yeah, that's the kind of nice thing about physical, is that it gives more power to the buyer, so to speak. And as it stands right now, looking at my app on my phone, I have just over 2,060 games in my collection, spanning over 20 different kinds of systems, from the NES all the way up to the current generation. I have a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X. I even have a kind of like a gaming PC as well, so I can play stuff on my gaming PC. I also have a Rogue Ally X, so I can actually play on the go as well. So I've got a bevy of different kinds of systems. And there are a wide range of reasons why I collect. I collect memories with these video games. And to actually kind of go back to 2,060 games in my collection thing, that's physical copies. I don't even want to know how many digital copies of games I own out there in the ether. Like I said, I've even rebought certain games that it's like, hey, I have this game physical, but I would also like it digital to play on multiple different platforms. So this number is probably wildly inaccurate in terms of how many games I own. But like I said, I collect memories with these video games, bygone eras when playing video games were actually fun. However, I mean, I can see the sentiment can be different for some people, because remembering a time when playing retro games was considered fun isn't because of the game itself. It was the time period in which you played them in. This is why a lot of guys in my generation, when we talk about old retro games we played as kids, we talk about the NES, the SNES, the Sega Genesis. And even now, when we talk to people, I talk to people 15, 20 years younger than me, they're talking about experiences they had with the PlayStation 2 being their first systems and having that be very retro for them. Even Xbox 360, kids like in their late 20s that talk about how many retro memories they had playing the Xbox 360 games. And granted, for me, that's not retro, because when Xbox 360 was around, I was in my 20s. That's not really considered retro, but when you think about it, it is for some people. Those are memories that they had when they were kids, when they were teenagers, or when they were like, preteens, talking about getting together with their friends and playing, Halo 3 on a 360. That's retro for them, and that's nostalgia for them. So we really can't knock it. Nostalgia is very subjective to a lot of people. And yeah, like I said, it was the time period in which you played them in. So it doesn't matter. It's different for some people. And that's the trap nostalgia plays on us. It tricks us into thinking these trinkets, these games, these movies, music, whatever it is, toys, whatever will bring us back to those times. And frankly, it won't. It may tickle that part of your brain that flashes you back to those times. And I know there's science that has studied this, that kind of points to specific parts of your brain that it connects to and you can kind of resonate with. But I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't, this, like I said, this is a diary. This is not a scientific paper on nostalgia. And, but yeah, like I said, that part of your brain gets tickled, flashes you back to those times. And, you just take a deep breath and you feel calm, you feel relaxed for a minute. You're saying to yourself, man, these are the good old days. I remember playing this game as a kid, and your memories flood back to that time when you were a kid, that time when you were a teenager, when, the weight of the world wasn't, so heavy on your shoulders. You were just, you were a kid, you were young, and you mostly thought about just having fun instead of dreading going to work or being constantly inundated with this crazy news cycle that we have, vying for your attention and these friggin' algorithms. Now, back then, it was like you would play that game, you'd be trapped in that moment. And then once you got out of that game, you can actually move on to the next thing. So there's a kind of like a weird philosophical idea to take note from that. It's just like being in that present moment, playing these retro games. You kind of remember those days instead of playing a video game because, you just want to escape from something. So I feel like that's a whole nother topic, but let's, but I know that I know the trick. I know the trick it plays on you, this whole like nostalgia baiting and thinking to yourself, you need this more often. And to me, it's not a bad trick. It's not a negative trick or anything like that. And yeah, there are some that take it way too far. I mean, do I take it too far? I mean, I have thousands of games in my collection. I think I do take it too far. And I kind of think this goes back to if I meet, when I'm around people and I meet new people and, they find out that I'm a gamer, quote unquote. I play video games. They ask me, well, what kind of video games do you play? And I usually laugh to myself, and I know what's coming next because I've had this question many times, and I tell them I play most everything. I then proceed to show them my Game Eye app that I have on my iPhone and show them how many physical games I own in my collection. And I generally get like a wide-eyed shocked response. They look at like, whoa, sometimes even an eye roll or even a stoned kind of like sad face of someone who feels sorry for me and thinks I'm trapped in some sort of nostalgic prison. They look and they're like, man, this is what you're spending your money on. This is what you're dedicating all your time to. I mean, yeah, sure. I can't help people's first instincts when I tell them I spend money on old video games. They're like, do you play them all? Which is a question I've gotten asked many times. I say, of course I can't, but I have played a good portion of them, the majority of them, and I will in the future too as well. There's games sitting on my shelf that I haven't played yet, but I have every intention of maybe getting to it at some point, and I do intend on living for a hot minute. So, there's opportunities out there. So, when in the future, though, like I said, that's another story. But as long as I have them on my shelves, there will be that chance. There could be one day I wake up and I'm just like, you know what? Let's take a look at what's on the shelf here. I did that in January. If you remember, I did kind of like a retro January where I played only retro games, and I think I may do that pretty much for the foreseeable future. Take the month off of playing new games and then just playing a lot of old games in my catalog and jumping around and, experiencing new things and experiencing even old things. So, and like I said, I keep collecting, should I stop collecting and, try to really focus on the games that I do have already, and kind of get them, done, or at least get some work done on some of those games, playing them before jumping into the next one. I mean, I could do that. I probably should do that. But to be honest, though, I enjoy the thrill of the hunt mostly. I mean, granted, nowadays I have most of what I want, most of what I need. The games that I grew up playing and the games that define me, not only as a person, but also as a video game enthusiast. So there isn't anything out there that I need. Like I said, need being a odd word to use, because I really don't need any of this stuff. I mean, I could live a life without a bunch of IKEA shelves loaded with thousands of games on them. I mean, when you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, collecting items and trinkets don't rank anywhere on that hierarchy. Nowhere does it say you need physical items to define your identity or define you as a person or who you are, or the thought of retaining nostalgic memories in physical form. Nowhere on that hierarchy of needs is it there. But self-actualization, self-esteem, self-realization, that you can make that argument to tie all that in. But like I said, this is not a psychiatry themed episode. This is more of a diary. But I gotta say, though, it's fun to collect. It's fun to interact with others who love to collect too. There's a lot of video game stores I go to where you're kind of looking at things and you're kind of just bumbling around and you overhearing a conversation someone's having about certain things, and you just kind of nonchalantly jump on in, and then you start kind of sharing a lot of cool stories, a lot of cool interests, and you even learn some new things about not only video games but about new people, even like store owners that can kind of learn a thing or two, or you can learn a thing or two from them. So, and to be honest, there's still more out there to find and collect. I mean, I see videos of these people that have like 30,000 games in their collection, 40,000 games in their collection, just massive troves of games that it's like, you think like, man, that's crazy. But that shows you how much there is out there. And the hobby itself, though, when you look at it that way, the hobby itself is very expensive. I will give you that. I will admit that 100%. Is it need to be that expensive? Absolutely not. And we can argue all day as to how it became so expensive. You could argue that YouTube and podcast content creators are creating this artificially inflated market, the rarity of everything, and even just like resellers that are pumping up these prices just for giggles, whatever. You really can't point it to one thing, but it's a multitude of different factors. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's our fault. Honestly, that's my opinion. It's our fault because we're the ones paying these prices. So it's encouraging sellers to sell them at these prices. If no one was coming around buying $500 old video games, then no one would be selling them for $500. I mean, it just is what it is. Most of these games are regardless, most of these games are much cheaper than the modern games you can get now. And most of these cheap games are actually great games with tons of fun and replayability to be had. I mean, I go back to the NES Mega Man games constantly every year. I mean, I go back and fire up old Resident Evil games every year too. And even some of the oddball ones that I just pull off my shelves randomly and have a great time with. I mean, a lot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, a lot of kind of like obscure PlayStation 2 games and PlayStation 1 games I play, back and forth. Sega Genesis I go to quite often. I had a lot of great memories with the Sega Genesis when I was a kid. There was the kind of like the dichotomy between Sega Genesis kids and Super Nintendo kids at the time. And to me, I was the edgy kid that I was like, Sega Genesis had this edge to it. It was a black system. Their marketing campaigns were always really cool, really edgy. They had, really good violent games. The Super Nintendo had these like childish Super Mario type games and like Sonic was cool. Streets of Rage was cool. You had Shinobi that was a really good ninja game. You had all these really cool, edgy games. I mean, I think I ended up getting a Super Nintendo kind of later on its life cycle, but Sega Genesis was where I was at the time. So I have a lot of, fond memories of going back and picking up a lot of those old Sega Genesis games. But nonetheless, though, like I said, with, the cheap games, with the bevy of cheap games out there, the dark cloud hovering over this hobby are the expensive ones, the rare ones and popular ones that the market has deemed valuable to us. I still crack up at all the Pokemon games that are, quote unquote rare or quote unquote expensive, but not really rare. It's constantly sought after, and the market of buyers out there is high. So the supply still is lower than the demand, but the supply is still there. It's just the demand for these Pokemon games are so huge, massive. You got a lot of guys, kind of later millennials, that love Pokemon. Granted, I didn't. I'm kind of glad I'm not a Pokemon fan, in regards to this, because, man, if I was a Pokemon fan, man, I'd be spending buco dollars for these Pokemon games. But, yeah, and I'm talking about some of these games can borderline hundreds of dollars, even to the thousands. Like Little Samson, I think, has jumped up to like $2,000 now. I think even like Complete in Box, which is wild, it's be even more than that. So, I mean, why on earth would anyone purchase those games? When they came out, they were not thousands of dollars. I mean, why would you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of these games? I mean, haven't these people ever heard of emulation? I mean, you got me there. Like, I don't have that much disposable income to justify many of those purchases. I'm not going out to buy, buy Little Samson for $2,000, or, I'm not looking for stadium events for my NES. I don't have $50,000 to spend. But, I mean, I'll tell you, the thrill is there, mind you. You go to these conventions or you go to these game stores and you see it there in the shelf and you're just like, man, look at it. Dude, I could buy that. If I, maybe got a second mortgage on my house or just slap it on a credit card if you had the limit. I mean, there could come a time when I take the plunge, and I have in some cases. I mean, I spent over $400 for the Steel Battalion for the Xbox, which, the Steel Battalion with the huge, joystick type controller. I've spent $250 for Chrono Trigger. I've bought Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy. That's an expensive one, and so many others. I mean, I went through the list, and even just like, man, I can't believe I spent money on that. Others, I was actually shocked to find out how much I paid for them and how much they are worth years later. I mean, I think randomly I bought Fox Hunt for the PlayStation 1 about 10 years ago. I bought it for $20. And I'm like, man, I remember playing this when I was younger. Like, this is cool. Like, $20, shoot. And then slowly over time, I just see the price jump higher and higher and higher. And I think now it's like $280. Crazy. Even games I kept in my collections for years. I mean, hanging on to Haunting Ground for the PlayStation 2 after originally buying it when it came out on the, back then was, I would say, a well worth purchase, as was every Silent Hill game I ever bought back when, or last couple of years. Silent Hill games have really jumped up in price. It's crazy. I mean, and that's it really. What's it worth really in the end? What are all these games really worth? And I think that's kind of the wrong question to ask. It's not worth anything, to be frank, despite the market that says otherwise. I mean, you got these resellers and you got these stores, you got eBay and Facebook Marketplace, all these places like dictating these games are worth something. These games are worth money. I mean, sure, they are, I guess. But to me, they're kind of more so snapshots in time. They're experiences that tell more than just stories. And more importantly, they're preservation items. I mean, video game preservation is a hot topic nowadays with games with digital games, companies want you to buy digital. They want you to just add them to your library and then tell you like you can always go back and download them at any point. And then all of a sudden come to find, oh yeah, not only are we delisting the game, but we're actually ceasing service of this game. So you can't even play this game no matter what. It's, it's crazy out there. But in terms of physical games, at least the majority of physical games, as long as I have them in my collection, as long as I have them on my shelves, I can go play them and not have to try to find them or go through shady means to do so. Most of these old retro games aren't even accessible to most gamers out there. and they can't be purchased through official means by their respective publishers and developers. You can't buy Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill 3 for the PlayStation 2 if you have a PlayStation 5, which is still kind of wild to me. Even even a game like Haunting Ground, for example, like, there's stories about like developers losing source codes, or losing the game rights, even to the point where it's like, well, we can't publish it because we can't reissue it because another publisher or another developer has the rights to it and refuses to for whatever reason, or can't because it's stuck in some weird legal limbo. So, there's a lot of these times where it's like, well, there's probably developers out there that would love to have this available for download, but they can't. They can't issue it. But I mean, that's why these prices are the way they are. That's really kind of the main driving force. And what's your other alternative to this? Downloading and emulating them on your PC? Well, I mean, yes, yes. I mean, I think more people nowadays are being more open to this idea, because it's the whole quote. And like I said, you can agree or disagree with this quote, but if, buying video games isn't owning them, then piracy isn't stealing them. So it's a matter of, like, say, for example, a game like Rule of Rose, that's like $500, $600 plus that, whatever. The average person that maybe wants to experience this game doesn't want to pay $600 for that game, but still wants to play it, still wants to experience it. So what's their alternative? Yeah, I guess emulation. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. And we can't argue that, because not a lot of people have $600 to just spend like that. I mean, I don't. I'm in a dual income, no kid household. I'm a dink. So even still, like, I mean, how am I going to justify to my wife, hey, I just bought a PlayStation 2 game for $600, $700? How do I can't even justify that to myself. But like I said, I mean, you make the decision yourself. Emulation is an option. I'll just say that. But me personally, I like holding the games in my hand. I like looking at them on my shelves. I like standing. Sometimes I just like going and just standing in front of my shelves and just looking at them. It's hard to describe what that feeling is, and it sounds kind of lame maybe to someone who just doesn't understand it, who's just like, what? It's just taking up space. And it is. It's taking up space. There's a lot of space in my basement that is dedicated to these shelves that I have. I could probably put some more stuff down there. I could, but, I don't know. I like the shelves. I like the organization system I have. I like looking at them. I love knowing that at any point I could just grab it off a shelf, slap it in the system, and play them right off rip without needing an update or needing a download patch or even a connection to the internet. So long as the system is connected to your TV by whatever means you have, I mean, you can play them. And I would honestly love nothing more than to give my hard-earned money to the devs and publishers of these games. Like, I would love to buy these old games from the developers and the publishers themselves, but sometimes their hands are tied, and they would be like, well, I would love to sell them to you, but I don't have the rights to them, or I don't have the ability to, or I don't have the source code to really just remake it or like kind of remaster it for a modern system, so to speak. But as of right now, the only option I have is giving my money to resellers who are just in it for the love of the game. They love literally, I would say, they're in the ecosystem of out there selling and buying games because they love the ecosystem. They love, video games. They love old, they love new. And granted, most retro resellers or video game store owners, when you talk to them and you ask them what they're playing, most of the time they're like, I'm not playing anything because, I'm running a store and all I think about are video games. So a lot of times when they come home, that's the last thing on their mind. So it's kind of funny in that it almost like, you think like, man, I would love to own a video game store. For me, it'd be kind of cool to run a video game store, but it would probably kill my love for playing video games because it's like, you think about video games all day. You think about selling, you think about buying, you think about talking even to people there. You're talking to your customers, you're talking to your, coworkers, and then like you're thinking about next steps for your store and everything. And then you go home and you want to unwind, and it's like, what, you're going to go sit down and play a video game now? it's got to be really worth your time. I mean, you're not going to be playing everything, but I can understand. Like I said, I've talked to a few game store owners that have kind of said, I mean, this is a job for me now, which, I mean, sometimes it's hard to do what you love because then maybe it ruins the love that you have for it. But so I said earlier that I mean, I have most of what I need. I do. I really do. So what's next? I mean, there are tons of old retro gaming experience I just never had as a kid or even as a teenager. Interestingly enough, a couple years ago, I got into collecting Sega Saturn, and I had a ton of fun training. I had a ton of fun draining my wallet, man, purchasing some of those games. Some of those games are really expensive. Not a lot of people had a Sega Saturn at the time, and you can actually go back and listen to I have one of my earlier episodes is a Sega Saturn retrospective that I did, where I talked a little bit about some of the problems the Sega Saturn had when it came out. But I mean, it's a good system. And honestly, I loved like researching what games were good for it, what games were kind of rare for it, what games were, the most bought, what were some of the, in some cases, the Sega Saturn versions were better than maybe their PlayStation counterparts. Not a lot, but some games that came out on the Sega Saturn and PlayStation, it's like you kind of got different experiences, and I kind of miss those days sometimes. Granted, in some cases it was worse on one system than the other, but it was cool because it's like, hey, this was a different experience than what you got on the other system. You buy a game on the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, like it's going to be vanilla, the same experience. So I kind of miss the days where games were made a little different depending on the hardware that you had at the time. But I never had a Sega Saturn growing up. I mean, even though years ago I told myself only collect games for systems that you owned in the past, because if you're telling yourself you're collecting nostalgia, then you should stick with nostalgia. But I feel like recently, over the last couple of years, I've kind of moved past that. And while granted, I collected most of what I had in the past or what I experienced in the past, I mean, the itch is still there to collect and hunt. So now I'm moving on to what I missed out on and what new experiences I want to find. New old experiences, I guess you could say. And for starters, I believe I mentioned this. I bought an Atari 7800 Plus. And if you don't know what it is, it's a new retro system made by Atari themselves. And it can play 2600 games and 7800 games on it. Unfortunately, it can't play 5200, but whatever. Both old games, you could buy the old cartridges, put it in this system, and then they have new reissues or homebrews. A lot of companies, there's a lot of developers out there still making games for old systems. I actually, if you're a fan of Angry Video Game Nerd, he just made a video game, Angry Video Game Nerd 8-bit, that he made for the Nintendo, but also, you could buy it on the PlayStation and Nintendo Switch and stuff. But he made an actual physical cartridge of his game that you could put into your Nintendo Entertainment System and play it. And there's a lot of, developers out there that are making new games for the Atari for whatever reason. It's a small niche of people. Listen, these games aren't going to be making money, but you got these developers, these maybe single house developers or even a couple people in them that are passionate about this system and really want to, keep these memories alive with even new experiences. And the 7800 Plus is it's actually a great system. It does a lot of heavy lifting by the system itself in terms of scaling to resolution on your HD TV. I mean, it's not stretching it to full screen, so it's keeping that 4:3 resolution, color fixing. The colors look bright and great in them. Granted, I've only played 2 games on it so far, but I've actually heard great things about what it can do. I mean, I've watched a couple different videos on it, and seen some good screenshots. I'm like, well, this is actually pretty. It's actually pretty good. I want to say at Midwest Gaming Classic last year, I actually talked to them. Atari was there, and they were selling it there. Now that's where I kind of first heard about it, and I was talking to some of the people there that were selling it, and they were like, yeah, I mean, this is kind of cool because you can go buy the old system, but you can't plug it into your TV, and these old systems are designed to run on old technology, on old TVs, on old CRT TVs, and not a lot of us have old CRT TVs out there. And, even sellers nowadays are selling these things, these old freaking bricks of TVs for like hundreds of dollars, which is wild to me that, you know, years ago people were throwing these out on the streets and getting rid of these, and where nowadays people are reselling them, which is crazy to me. But obviously this old tech was designed to run on old TVs, and the majority of us now only have HD TVs. So we can't just plug in an Atari, 2600 and into our HD 4K TVs and run it. Like, you have to buy upscaling hardware, you got to buy, all this stuff, and sometimes even that doesn't look the greatest. So Atari came out and just made this new system, and it's HDMI, and it, jumps in resolution, but it looks great, honestly. I've never owned in the past. I've never owned a 2600 or a 7800 at any point. And while I've jumped on them every now and then at conventions and whatnot, I think I even had like a couple friends when I was a kid that had them, and I was like, I wasn't really that impressed. I was like, this is all right. I mean, the NES, when I played the NES, it blew my brain blew, basically, if that's the right saying. I was pretty impressed with the NES. The Atari, not so much, but so I've never had any of these systems in my home, and I feel that the 7800 Plus, which was made by Atari themselves, is a good way to go. And kind of thinking about that, Neo Geo right now is far from my mind from wanting, especially considering how expensive some of the games are and even the system itself. I'm really excited for this recently announced Neo Geo AES system. It was announced last week, and it's a new retro system that will be far cheaper than the original console's worth now. And it's the same thing that the Atari 7800 Plus does. You could take those old cartridges that are like massive. They're about the size of the systems themselves nowadays. And you can still put it in this new system. And I think you can also buy a collection of I think they said like every Neo Geo game ever released for the system. And I don't know. I didn't do any research on it, if it's in digital format or if it's on kind of like a all-in-one cart or something like that. But that's really cool. That's really cool that you still got these companies out there that are like, hey, there's a market for this. There's people buying this, and there's people spending too much money for this stuff. I want to say the Neo Geo itself is like well above $500 to $700 to buy it. And then the games themselves, I would say there is no cheap game out there. They're all like hundreds of dollars for some of these games. So this is probably the far cheaper option. I mean, yeah, granted, you have like Neo Geo collections out there that you could buy for your Switch and your PlayStation. Yeah, fine. But if you want old hardware, this is kind of the way to go, honestly. And this is, like I said, this is made by the company themselves. This is made by SNK. So the original, guys and gals are making this stuff. And this is what I want from old retro companies. And Sega, if you're listening to this, make a new Dreamcast system, please. Even like a Dreamcast / Sega Saturn system would be awesome. That would be really cool. I think it would be a slam dunk for you guys. But that's me. I'm not a businessman. I'm just an enthusiast. But I think it would be a slam dunk. So with the Midwest Gaming Classic coming up this weekend, if you're listening to this episode on day one when it gets released, I'm actually going to be on the hunt for Atari 2600 and 7800 Plus games, or actually just 7800 games in general. I've got a short list of games like Frogger, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Midnight Mutants. I heard was pretty good, kind of like a top-down Legend of Zelda style horror game. But that's kind of pricey. Ikari Warriors, pretty good. Xevious, I think I talked about. Space Invaders, I'm pretty sure is on there somewhere. Pac-Man, Mrs. Pac-Man, all these. Commando, I guess that's on my list too. Fatal Run, which seems like a pretty cool racing game, kind of similar to Outrun. But yeah, so many more, and there's so many cheap ones. I mean, let's be real. Atari games aren't worth much at all. Probably resellers are like got these like boxes of Atari games that they just want to get rid of so bad. So I'm pretty sure I'll find some bulk deals out there, but I think I got to try to avoid the crappy games that aren't worth the plastic these carts are made on. So I got to be kind of picky with what I find, because it's like there's probably going to be some games that are like it's really not worth getting. I suppose maybe even though E.T. is notoriously crappy game, I feel like I should have that. but I'm debating whether or not that's something worth getting. Because it's like, I don't want to have a crappy game in my collection just to have a crappy game in my collection. But although I do have crappy games in my collection now, that it's like, I don't know why I have this, but it's there. I don't know. So, but I'm even regardless, even if I buy a crappy game, I'm excited to experience new things on this system. And I'm excited to experience new games that maybe even like I missed out on, that I was like, oh man, I can't believe I missed out on this game when it first came out. I talked about recently playing Luigi's Mansion for the first time a few weeks ago. And I was like, I can't believe I missed out on that when it first came out, because I would have probably loved Luigi's Mansion when I was, when it came out at the time. But I don't know. Like I said, it's never too late to experience new things. And a friend of mine also just recently yelled at me about needing a Sega Master System. And if you're listening to this, you know who you are. I've never owned a Master System in my life. And while I floated the idea of maybe getting the power converter instead of the Master System itself, I really thought against it. I mean, I have a Sega Genesis, and I do have a 32X. I have the Sega CD. I have all that stuff because, I mean, I never had a Sega CD growing up. I had a 32X, which was a bad purchase on my part because there really wasn't anything at the time. But they were giving them away for cheap at the time, so it's like, well, whatever. The power converter itself, if you don't know what it is, it's nice to have because it plugs right into the top of your Sega Genesis slot, and you can play Master System games on it. You put the Master Game cart on it, and then the Sega Genesis does the heavy lifting and, plays the Master System games on your TV. But let's be real, the only true way to play the Master System games is on the actual system itself. I mean, with that controller in your hand. Playing a Master System game with a Sega Genesis controller doesn't seem right to me, but I don't know. He encouraged me to consider collecting for the system, and I'm easily, influenced. So I'll be on the hunt for some Master System games. Thankfully, most of those games aren't ridiculously expensive, so it'll be nice for my pocketbook in that sense. So, Ken Sidon, I think, is one. Land of Illusion, Outrun, Psycho Fox are kind of some of the kind of like oddball ones that I'm kind of looking for. Then there's, he also recommended Ease, which I haven't been an Ease fan. Really, I've played some of the ones on the Vita, and I think on the PlayStation 4. I played a couple of them in the past, so they're not bad games. But I think old JRPGs are kind of hit or miss for me. But I've heard good things about it. I mean, I follow Happy Console Gamer on YouTube, and that's all he talks about. Phantasy Star is another one. Dragon Crystal, Clax, he recommended. Interestingly enough, the Master System had a lot of Game Gear games on it, where it was like, I think they were on the Master System and then ported to the Game Gear, or vice versa. Because like Sonic the Hedgehog is on the Master System. So I'm probably going to pick up some of those. Hopefully not, break the bank too much. But yeah, I have a feeling, even though I still have other games I'm kind of looking for, I think I may be pivoting my focus to collecting for majorly for these two systems. Three systems, 1700, 2600, and the Master System. I've looked into other systems too, like the TurboGrafx 16. However, I noticed some of the better games on that system are quite expensive. I'm still considering it as a future endeavor, but for now, I'll just put a pin in it. After an older episode I did about the Commodore 64, I considered collecting for that system and all. However, once I deep dove into how it all works, plays, and runs, I pretty much thought against it. It's difficult to collect for due to the rarity of the games and even full setups, monitor, keyboard, and all. I know you can plug it into your TV, but I think you need to it's preferable to have a monitor with it. Adding to that, I guess I've heard some of the game's ability to work are pretty finicky. I mean, I may dive into the C64 Plus that they did recently. I talked about that in my episode. Maybe I'll buy that in the future. Maybe. I don't know. And there's tons more out there, too. I mean, there's like the Atari Jaguar that I don't have. There's like the 3DO. There's the Philips CDI. There's, tons. I mean, obviously the Neo Geo I talked about earlier. And while the ones in the past that had short lifespans or even low sales numbers, a lot of those translate to high value, high cost, rarity even. Do I collect just to have or just to display, or do I collect with the intention to play? And honestly, I collect with the intention to play. I don't have any sealed games in my collection. I'm not on the hunt for sealed games. If I happen to come across one that's good price, yeah, I'll get it. But once I buy it, I'm opening that thing up with the intention of playing it. I know the value of sealed games. However, as I stated, I buy with the intention of playing, not merely just as a collector's piece or a resellable item. Yeah, they look good on a shelf, but I do have intentions of playing it. In the grand scheme of things, I've made my money back and then some in this hobby. A lot of the purchases I've made, I bought for cheaper when they were kind of lower value. And now as I kind of go on with over the last like 10, 15 years, I see the prices go up and up and up on some of these. And they keep going up. Some of these games, and while some of these games you can see as monetary investments, you buy it cheaper and then hope that they go up in price a couple years later. To me, I see them as memory investments, both old and upcoming. And even though like these are old games with outdated mechanics, they don't have a lot of quality of life things that we have nowadays. They're still fun. I mean, and new games are great values, like I said, in fun and quality of life mechanics. And I still actively keep my eye on new games and purchase them regularly. I mean, right now I'm playing Pragmata for the PlayStation 5 and I'm having a lot of fun with it. However, I mean, there's really nothing like holding up an old cartridge in your hand, reading the back of an old PlayStation 2 disc case, like reading even a book that they have in the games, for crying out loud, and clicking the power button of an old system right before sitting down and transporting yourself back in that time. I mean, there's nothing like, the buttons and the tactile feedback of some of the controllers, the systems itself, the power button, the eject button. Man, I mean, what I'm grateful for still now, actually, is that some of the collections that video game companies are pumping out these days. I talked about Neo Geo. I talked about Neo Geo like coming out with collector's pieces. There's like the Atari 50 that you can buy, where it's like 50 of the greatest Atari games on one collection right now. There's like Capcom collections, there's Konami collections and stuff. I talked about this in a past episode, I think, too, of like retro games you can still buy on modern systems, and there's tons of different collections that you can buy. Arcade Archives is big, where you could buy games individually. I think some of the Capcom collections you can buy individually too as well. So you can still go back and play the original Street Fighter 2 on your PlayStation 5 or your Nintendo Switch if you want. And these collections are still reminding us that retro is still prevalent today. The average video gamer age is getting older and older. So, there's still a market for this type for the old. I'll gladly spend money on these collections, especially if I don't have any of them in my physical collection personally. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself how you can't afford collecting retro games, and many people can't, I admit it, or maybe many people don't want to. Maybe people don't see the value of like dropping so much money on some of this stuff. There are modern classic collections out there for your modern systems that you probably have that you can play on your systems right now. So, there's still a market for you even if you're interested in it. So, yeah, I think that's it. All I really have to say. Stay tuned for the future. I mean, my collection journey is far from over, and I'll probably be following up this episode immediately with kind of like I'll probably do a video of what I picked up at the collection at the Midwest Gaming Classics. So subscribe to me on YouTube, Retro X Podcast. You can catch some of my videos there. I know I was at Retrofest Arkansas last year, so I did a pickup video there too as well. So I'll be sharing some of what I picked up and a lot of the games that I picked up. Maybe I'll pick up a couple consoles too as well. So stay tuned. But thanks for listening, guys. Take it easy.